All right, 3, 2, 1. All right, we're going to go ahead and switch to the, fantastic, thank you. Welcome, thank you for coming out today, everyone in the audience. We have an exciting presentation, but I want to remind you that today's webinar is brought to you by the American Society for Quality, ASQ, and specifically the Government Division of the American Society of Quality. So keep joining us. We'll go to the next slide there. All right. So just a quick overview of who is the Government Division. We're really trying to bump that out. And for some of you that you might not be as familiar with ASQ, but ASQ, the American Society of Quality, represents the voice of quality globally. We have 80,000 members across the globe, and within ASQ, there's 26. There might be actually 27 divisions now. There's a new division that was stood up. But of those 27 divisions, the Government Division is one of those 27 divisions. But government touches every part of life. So even though we are one division, we actually interjoin in a lot of places with a lot of the other 27 divisions. But the focus of the Government Division, is a community of practitioners that's focused on quality and performance improvement in government at all levels: federal, state, local, and international government, equality in your government services. So we're composed of, we have a nice group of cross-disciplinary practitioners that are from government leaders, employees within government, seasoned experts, consultants that work with governments. And we also work closely with universities, so their professors, their students. And we look heavily to engage in the public sector, which often also crosses into private sector areas. As I say, we're from the government and we are here to help. And we really would like to invite you to join our community, specifically ASQ Government. Next slide, please. All right, so we got outside of today, we have a couple more upcoming webinars, one in April, so that is going to be about the ANSI ASQ G1 standard that's going to be in use by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, so ATF to make that a little bit shorter, and the National Center for Explosive Training and Research, so the NCETR. That will be coming up in April, so stay tuned. Go register after this webinar, not right during this webinar, after this webinar. And in May, I see a block on the screen here. Okay, thank you. In May, we have a webinar, quantifying your culture and how to measure and not visualize your cultural transformations. We all know that our cultures, within business, within government, is all being changed and shaped by events going on in the world. But even without those specific events, change is going to happen, and it's best that we understand the changes ahead of time. So in order to participate in those webinars and future webinars, please go to our site, which you see listed here below. So screenshot that or just Google ASQ Government Division, and it'll take you to these appropriate sites. But we'll have more webinars coming soon. All right, so you're fine. Yeah, there you go. So as we get started, a few little housekeeping notes. We want to hear back from you. So we want you to make sure you use the Q&A tab. I hope that's available. If it's not available, throw in the chat. Like, I don't see a Q&A tab that I can actually send questions in. And in lieu of that, if there becomes an issue with the Q&A tab, go ahead and send it into the chat. But we really like to kind of keep the Q&A in the Q&A and let the chat area be for more general comments that aren't necessarily directed to our presenter. But go ahead and send those questions throughout the webinar, and we'll make sure to address as many questions as we can, during, leave some space at the end of the presentation for that, and maybe have to take a few things offline. And you'll also find some contact information for our speaker and our officers at the end of the presentation. But before I move on and pass the mic, I do want to introduce this gentleman that will be speaking to us today, Mr. Jared Perlow. Now, he is, I've presenter has served as the Chief Deputy Clerk of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. That's a mouthful. Since December 2016, so he's been with them for a while. Mr. Perlow has received a bachelor's degree in arts and his law degree with honors from American University. Where he also was the editor-in-chief of Administrative Law Review. So he's a very accomplished gentleman. Throughout his ASQ tenure, he's also attained certifications as a CMQOE, or the Certified Manager of Quality Organizational Excellence. He's also a designated evaluator of the ANSI ASQ G1 2021 standard. He's in the early crop of them. And he's a member of the Center for Quality Standards in Government, which is a center within ASQ Government Division. He's also a certified court executive through the National Centers for State Courts. So at this point in time, you should be excited to hear from this very learned, very experienced, very passionate gentleman. And I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Jared Perlow.
Thanks, Larry. That was a long but very much appreciated introduction.
Absolutely.
And thanks to you and everyone with the Government Division for coordinating everything for today's program. So, and before I get started, I want to give a special hello and welcome to my colleagues at the Federal Circuit, as well as colleagues from across the federal judiciary and state judiciary who are other court professionals doing a lot of the same things that we're doing here, and I greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend with me. So what we're going to do today is talk about how our office has used G1 and quality management to improve our operations in the court. We are very excited to be doing this at the end of the month, where we had some great news here that we were certified under the new G1 standard at the silver level, and we are the first organization to both get silver level and also any award certification under the new G1 standard. And today I'm going to walk you through the 5-year journey we've had here at the Federal Circuit to get to this point. But first, a little bit about who we are for those not familiar with the structure. We're going to do a brief civics lesson here. This is the federal judiciary chart of them. The green are trial level or agency level decisions. Cases then go from there up to one of the intermediate courts of appeals. This is where we are on the chart, and we're a little different from the 12 regional circuits in that the Federal Circuit has national jurisdiction over some specialized areas of law that I'm going to share in a moment. But like us and the other 12 circuits, regional circuits rather, everything from us then goes to the United States Supreme Court if they choose to take our cases. So we're in the middle with our 12 other circuit colleagues. So the types of cases we get, first in a broad administrative law area, are in international trade, federal personnel decisions, reviewing those, and veterans benefits decisions. We also hear appeals concerning claims against the United States government seeking money and relief in that regard. And then we also hear intellectual property cases, patents and trademark, patent cases either from an administrative agency or from a federal trial court comprise about 60% of the cases that we hear. We are the only court, appellate court, that can hear these types of cases on appeal. We also are unique in that we have no criminal cases, no bankruptcy cases, or immigration cases come to us on appeal. So it's all civil and administrative agency matters. The clerk's office, here is a picture of our wonderful staff out on the steps of our courthouse, which is on Lafayette Square in Washington, D.C. If we all were to turn our heads to the left, we would see the White House. So we're right in the middle of it all. but this is our staff of 19 full-time folks. And this is our mission statement, which I'll talk a little more about how we came up with this. But our two functions here are to facilitate the progression of cases through the court, as well as to preserve the court's record. And for those from state courts or more familiar with the state courts, the clerk's offices in the federal system do not have as broad a span of responsibilities and functions that state courts do, but the concepts are all the same: administrative and operational support for the court's judges. So with that, a little bit about ASQ ANSI G1, for those not familiar with it. This was finalized for publication. We're like about at the anniversary, 1-year anniversary of it. And it was developed within the ASQ Government Division and the Standards Committee in ASQ. And the idea behind the structure was to put standards in place that would be applicable to government entities of all type, to allow them to evaluate the effectiveness and quality of their operations and services. The whole system is built around having structured system management and maturity modeling, and so you move up and down, and I'll talk about that in the next screen. There are now uniform objective measures for quality practice at the different levels, and there's a basis to build in visual management. So think of that as a transparent means for others in and outside of the organization to see how the organization is functioning. And unlike some other total quality management or continuous improvement efforts that have been undertaken in the government, these are designed to be done at the individual department level, not necessarily a top-down direction, but with individual components of an organization or agency or whatever, to be able to implement and make that incremental change there, sometimes with the hope that others in the organization might go along and similarly do that, but it's meant to be done on a more focused approach, and was a good candidate for our office and the focused approach that we have here. This is a simplified version of the system maturity model under G1 standard, and I'm going to go through now and show how the organization, when I started here very late 2016, not the organization, I'm sorry, the clerk's office operations, not the rest of the court. The clerk's office operations was at the level 0, frankly, and how we moved in 5 years up to level 3. And just a word of disclaimer beforehand, we did not have the benefit of having G1 available to us until just a little over a year ago. We had an early draft of it that we were able to work off of. So some of the initial stuff, I'm going to shoehorn it into how it would fit into G1, but understand we did not have the benefit of the G1 framework and roadmap to guide us, which was its own challenge. So initial challenges, we did an assessment of where things were, and big things were facing us. So first off, we had 75% of our staff were misaligned with their official duties. So they just, what was on paper didn't match reality. Distribution of work didn't really, wasn't equitable. It led to about 25% of the staff didn't even have enough work to fill a week. So we were overutilizing and underutilizing at the same time. There was no mechanism for truly evaluating the accuracy of the work that our staff were performing. Once we started calculating and tracking that in 2017, we had someone as low as 50% of accuracy of their work, which is by any standards not even close to where we should be. We had really no coherent training or professional development opportunities for staff. We had a cycle of kind of endless training for folks with no real understanding of what progress could be made or when was progress being made. And there were really no performance standards or expectations. We knew we had work to do, filings come in, we needed to do something with them, and we did it, but it wasn't clear, how we should be doing it, any uniformity to it, and with any specific measurable time frame or quality level to it. So that's a lot. And if we were in the G1 framework, we could go through, and the first category for a system is purpose and structure. And you know, I highlighted the part no structure, and there really wasn't. It was actually a flat organization. There was no specialization of any kind. And so I would say if I were evaluating this, we would be at 0 for that. Goal directedness through measures and feedback. Whether you look at you're setting goals, you're getting feedback on those goals, and then making adjustments accordingly. We did not have any clearly defined outcomes or expectations for performance, except you just had work you needed to do it. So that's going to get a 0 too. And managing of intervening risks, intervening variables and risk. That is, you know, what are the challenges you might face if something goes wrong or something needs to go right in order for success to happen? Have you identified it, made any plans for it? No, we didn't do that either. And then lastly, alignment, evaluation, and improvement. There was no systematic effort to take existing experiences, learn from those, and make improvements based on learned experiences instead of anecdote or feelings or things like that. Or kind of management by crisis. And so that was also a 0. So, you know, nowhere to go but up. And so the first thing we did was we, you know, I'm going to show you the steps that go right now. I'll put it up on the screen. So we didn't have, as I said, the structure of G1, but we managed to get there a little bit. So this divides it into the 4 different areas again, and I wanted to put on the screen for you what steps our levels 1 and 2 were for each of the different categories, just so you can take a moment and see this. Because we didn't have G1 available to us, we couldn't go in the incremental from 0 to 1 to 2 and then to 3, and so 1 and 2 kind of blurs and overlaps. So I'm just going to talk about some of the stuff that we did that I think with the benefit of hindsight would have aligned in these categories. Whether it was a 1 or a 2, I can't say, and it honestly isn't important. But taking just, you know, knowledge that we had with quality management and general, you know, good court operational practices, here are some of the things that we did, and they're going to be in these 4 different areas. So first, this is our life of an appeal chart. It dated my arrival here, and it maps out from the beginning when an appeal comes in to the very end when the case is closed and done, and either goes back below, or if someone wants to take it up to the Supreme Court, they can do that. So this was the general system map for what we did in the office. And what first thing we did was put some structure to it. So chopped up this chart and then created our then organizational chart, where we were a little smaller back then. We took everything in the first part of it and created a functional section, our case management section, that focused on handling this portion of the chart. Then we created our court services section that handled on the 4 through 7 of the chart. There's some overlap, but for purposes of this, that's really the big takeaway. We also did something pretty unique here. Blue did, my animation went too quickly for me. There it is. Green, we created this unit that handled the quality management and would be inward focusing and looking at applying, getting metrics and measurements and applying some continuous improvement tools to help benefit the other sections of the office. And then we also had in blue the general administrative functions that came over across the whole office that didn't fit neatly into this chart. So next, we also realized we needed some type of a quality management program to know how well the work was that we were doing it, and whether we were what was the error rate, whether we were making improvement on that and whatnot. And so what you're seeing here is a screenshot of our, this may have been the second version of it, but we started it in 2017, 2018 we were up to this version, and we would do quality control and implemented a quality control system over the work of our case managers and came up with a scoring system for that. And you can see here kind of how we track that, and based on how we scored it, that would then determine someone's accuracy level. We set out to do a 100% check on our mission critical entries, which are, two simple ones were, when you open the case, that has to be right because that can impact whether the case, anything happens with it. And then when you close the case, to make sure it's closed out right. So those are two critical points in the case. Other stuff is important, but an error there may not be as fatal, so to speak, in the performing our role in that case. We did random sampling for those non-critical entries, and in the first year of just tracking this and identifying the errors back to the case managers and having corrective action and some supplemental training on that, we managed to increase the accuracy by 10.2% just in the first year of doing that. And we'll talk more about where we went from there. So this is a good example of that you're setting that goal and then having an ability to measure and give feedback and track and monitoring to improve the quality of your work. Another thing we started tracking, there were some morale issues when I got here, and we started working on those and finally put in an employee satisfaction survey with metrics. This was the first reporting out of that survey and how we were doing with that, but we set a goal of 80% for it, and so we were able to evaluate and see, all right, are we hitting 80%, are we over, are we under, and being able to focus change there. So as a way to manage our risks, which is a simplified way to think of this portion of it, we didn't have current or standardized written procedures at that time. We had stuff, but it was, wasn't current, needed to be updated. We first sought out to fully document. We involved the whole office with doing this. We created something in SharePoint, called it the Minute Book. And in, let's see, November 2017 is when this went live. We started creating it in about May, had the whole office involved with basically writing down what we're doing, reviewing it, quality checking on it, and did that documentation of 141 procedures in, 115 working days, so that we at least had a reference tool for training staff and add that type of control and managing the risk of, well, there are a bunch of different ways of doing it. After this, the following year, we went back, and because we didn't have consistent data entry standards for our case management system, we had a lot of errors in there, not errors, but we had, there was an accuracy concern with it. So someone entered it this way, someone entered it that way. We needed to go through and really clean that up. We called that our CMCF is the name of the system we use. We did a full reconfiguration of it. We eliminated a lot of redundancies in it, made the system more efficient, put in controls to standardize some of the work that was being done in there, again, additional education for staff, to get the data in our system accurate and reliable, the historic data, but then also going forward. Another way to help make sure that we don't have a perpetual garbage in, garbage out, so to speak, with our data, and we would have actual data we could then use to start studying and analyzing other parts of our operation. On the broad category of alignment, evaluation, and improvement, some early things we did. We implemented an annual project planning and evaluation system on those projects. The first couple of years, we had about 20 initiatives. We involved staff with that on individual project teams, did basic project management. We had so much to do, dividing it up and having everybody participate was a really effective way for us to be able to do that at the same time as continuing our operations. We revised our mission statement to make it very focused on our statutory responsibilities, and also identifying what were the core values of the office and then incorporating that into other onboarding and training in the office so that we all were operating under the same sense of culture here. And then last, we started producing an annual report, which kind of tied everything together, provided metrics, measurements, but also summaries of the work that we had accomplished. It was a good way to share with other court leadership and the staff to capture everything that we were doing, and having a review of that to see, all right, well, now what's kind of the next phase and next step. So this went on for until about 2020 or so, and then heard about G1 and oh, this seems like something we needed to look into here. And I'm going to just put up, here are the summarized descriptions of what level 3 is at. And once we had the written, this is what the steps were that you needed to do, it was, I won't say easy, but it was easier for us to see, oh, well, we think we're about here, we want to move up to the next level. What do we need to do? And so by looking at what the standard is, it dictated kind of where we went from there. And so for everything from what I'm going to share you from this point on are things that we implemented as a result of getting into system maturity and the G1 standard. So before that, we kind of cobbled it together just based on general knowledge. This next part had a more structured, systematic approach, and we really saw some great improvements that I'm going to share with you once we started having a clear roadmap for that structure, which is really one of the big benefits of G1. So again, we start for system purpose and structure. We start back again with our life in the field chart. We got some additional staffing in our office and restructured again a little bit. Some similarities to what we had before. Again, we still had our case manager group focusing on the first three portions of our map. We had our court services and expanded court services section now handling the last portion of the map. We also added in some general public interaction and broad administrative support items were added there as well. And then we kept and expanded our quality management system, our quality management section, I'm sorry, to add some additional capabilities there as we were taking things to the next level, so to speak. And then we crafted in with, kind of my immediate folks, we had a, to handle broad administrative things for the office and also to help coordinate some of these efforts. I'm going to show examples, instead of showing everything, because there's a lot. I thought we could take the example of just the motion portion of this and walk through how we analyzed and took that into a more coherent structure within the G1 framework. So all my examples are going to be in the motion context. So first off, we did a SIPOC analysis of a motion, and some of this may be repetition for some of you, for others it may be new, so I'll spend a moderate amount of time on this. So what you do in SIPOC analysis is you figure out what are things coming in to the process you're doing, and then what are you doing to it, and then sending out the other end of it. If you think about manufacturing, it makes a little more sense. A piece of metal comes in, you do some manipulation to it, and out comes a widget, and it's delivered to your customer. We don't manufacture anything here. We process cases here. So we have to think about this a little differently. But when we think of our suppliers, so who's giving us things, that would be the counsel in cases or litigants if they don't have counsel. So those are our suppliers, and they send motions to us, which is the input. So we receive these motions from them. They prepare them, whatever, and then they file them with us. We get them. And then there's some process we do with them. The big process that the clerk's office does, some procedural motions we decide, more complex motions, those go to the judges to decide. But in all circumstances, the clerk's office is responsible for doing a quality review on those motions, basically making sure that whatever the suppliers have provided to us through their input motion conforms with our very lengthy rules of court. Things as simple as, is the right case number written on it? Is there a signature on it? Those are basic things. There's some other things that are involved with it. But we do some type of quality review on that. From that quality review, we either produce an order, whether it's an order that we're entering that order, deciding the motion, or it's an order that comes from the judges, or so that's resolving that motion, or if we find something is not compliant, our office issues a non-compliance notice, and then there's an opportunity for them to fix it within a certain amount of time. Whether it's an order or non-compliance, it's going out from us, so that's an output, and that goes to the customers. The judges are customers here because they're involved and are the recipients of whatever order may come out of it as well, but then the counsel and litigants get the order of non-compliance telling them what to do on the input that they originally submitted to us. So just one example, but we wound up doing this for all the different parts of what we did in the office. once we have an understanding of the inputs and outputs and kind of what we're contributing to that process, we then construct principal activity groups. And principal activity groups are these, you can segregate those into kind of these unique things that there's a clear output that comes out of something that you do, and it's something that goes directly to the purpose of the organization. So here again is the chart of our system map. From this, plus the insights we had about where those inputs and outputs were going and what we were doing with that process, we created 12 principal activity groups. These are 7 of them. These align almost exactly with the items on our original system map, but with a slight variation on names. And then we also created 5 supporting principal activity groups. So they weren't directly on this, but things like managing our case management system. Well, that we absolutely have had that. There's a whole function that goes on with that. Financial management concerns, we receive fees from the court and process those, how we manage our office and staff within workforce management, our public information and record side of things, and then just general support that we're providing to our stakeholders, which includes the judges, as well as those suppliers, so mainly counsel and the litigants that are here. So then we came up with these 12 principal activity groups. And again, this is where motions fits into that. So now we understood the inputs and outputs. We had a defined principal activity group. Now we're going to go through and do a full structural alignment of this. So what is the outcome of this group? And the outcome that we want to have, the kind of the end value result of this is we receive, file, and act on compliant motions. Okay, great, that makes sense. What are the things that lead to that success? So what does success look like, might be a way to think of it. And we came up, those are called influencing factors, and what we came up with were these 4. So we want motions are acted on within the time standards, they're compliant with rules and procedures, responses and replies to motions are compliant and timely filed, and basically there's no correction that we have to make because of an error we made. Mistakes happen, and sometimes we get things wrong, and the judges may decide they're going to reconsider it, or the judge's decision may need to get reconsidered, whatever that may be. We don't do that part of it, but as long as we're not initiating the cause of the error, we view that as a success on our part. On anything else, that we don't have control over. So these were 4 areas. We thought if we get all 4 of these, then we have been successful at delivering that outcome. The next part is figuring out, well, what are the different variables that influence whether we're able to be successful on it. So those are called intervening variables. We did a cause and effect. So if we want to have on-time filings, what are the things that we need to have in place? And I'm not going to read all of these for you. We have a lot of them. So, for example, we have to make sure our case management system is working. If it's not working, people can't file a motion. We can't enter an order on a motion. Do we have current processes written? Are people trained on how to do this? Do we have a quality system? So all these various things that, an error or issue with one of these could disrupt our ability to accomplish it. And we'll take this information and one of the other parts of applying G1 to see how we manage and plan around making sure that we're able to make sure these issues happen successfully and that we've mitigated against any risk within those items. And then last, we were like, well, what are the things we need to measure with this? So basically, how do we know we're doing what we're supposed to be doing with it? And we came up with 3, and I'll skip right back. You can see what the items were, the influencing factors, and those form the basis of, all right, well, how can we measure and track these? And so we thought, well, are we timely processing motions, responses, and replies? Can we count that? Yes, we can count that, and we can see if we're doing it or, if we're not doing it. How compliant are the filings that are coming in? That gets in the supplier management. That's something we can track, and we can see, all right, only 50% of things that are coming in are actually compliant with the rules. That's something we probably need to look at. And then looking at, how many corrections are due to errors we've made, a simple, true, false type of thing there. With these measurements, we then set, what is the performance standard that we have, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. We also, after doing all of this, within each of our principal activity groups, identified those key processes, workflows that we did, and then mapped those out. So this is an illustration of one of those process maps for issuing an order. And so we actually have their level 3 processing standard, means it has to be issued the same day as it's received. And I think by 4 p.m. it's on a later screen. But this is just a flow chart to help us document it. We use these for when we need to do a process review on it. We use these for teaching, and just as a general reference tool. Much easier to follow one of these than just a written, narrative instruction or step-by-step instruction. Moving into the second part of the criteria we look at, so goal directedness through measures and feedback. So taking that structure that we put in place, are we setting goals for those, and then are we measuring against those goals and to get that feedback, to know how we're doing? So we significantly upgraded our quality management system last summer. We now, this is a screenshot of it. It's in SharePoint. Aspects of it are now automated. When something comes in, new filing comes in, their quality assurance staff take a look at it. Case openings, those are in the 100% check. So if it's green, that means it was reviewed, no issues. If it's a blue, there was an issue. The notes, let them put in what there was an issue. When it is flagged by quality control, a notification gets automatically generated to the case manager as well as the case manager supervisor, letting them know about the error. They then have to correct the error, and then in that last column you can see there's a date for going back and making sure that the correction was made on it. And then from here we're able to calculate accuracy, but we now have a notification system for this, as well as a system for making sure that we're following through on those corrections. And next, this is just an example of one of the case processing standards that we revised. For timeliness, we have a beautiful rainbow chart, 7 different levels. Each document or process is assigned to one of these levels. They're uniform across the office now. So, this is level 4. This is the time standard I have to get this done. After really focusing on this last year, we had some really significant improvements, an average 49% reduction in processing time after coming up with that structure, putting in goals in place, measuring those goals, giving feedback, and getting that continuous cycle going. I've highlighted just where it is for our electronically filed motions. These are average work days there. So really significant changes. Again, these all average out to about 49% reduction across last fiscal year. Employee satisfaction, we've continued doing that. This shows we've had about an 8% increase since we started doing this on the most recent reporting of it. We then took, with those measurements that I talked about, and created the key performance indicators, KPIs, for those familiar with that. Here I'm showing for 2 we have within the motions area, so this is our principal activity group. The indicator, so timely processing of motions, how compliant are the motions. Then here's the performance requirement that we set, which is based on stakeholder input, kind of our legal and regulatory requirements, input from the court on the policies we have here, as well as management, on what we think is kind of the minimally acceptable level. We set for the first one that we want 90% of our motions processed within 3 working days of filing. So that's the standard, and then we start measuring to that. And you can see as we go through, so Q1 2020, it was below 90%, so that gets an X of 77.5%. But it lets us pinpoint, all right, we need to work on this. So, okay, we got up to, at the end of that year, we were up to 91, so green check, we were meeting it. We dipped again, continue looking at it, and we've now had steady for 3 quarters. That we've been successful at that, and actually the numbers continue to improve from there. The last item on here, so we'd like 80% of the motions found to be compliant. That's something we've had. We actually had something, so we have about 30 of these across all the areas, and when we see something gets a red X, I think we had 2, or no, we had 2, I think, last quarter. We then look at, all right, what's going on? We need to take a look at this. What adjustments should we be making? And really help us fine-tune things. And that was a lot of what we did to get that across the board in multiple areas. So these, again, tie directly into that original structure that we created. And there's the highlight of that. Okay. Talked about intervening variables and risk management. So we do SWOT analysis here now. We do it annually. We do it as part of developing new initiatives, the standard strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We implemented a new risk management system. We score and assign a risk level. Items in that critical area get put into an annual risk management plan. We identify what we're going to do, how we're going to act on that, and kind of a plan for what we're going to do, even if it's just we're going to accept this risk, and then who's responsible for that. So risk analysis, a more detailed look at that for there. And for those critical items, we have a critical response program that if a critical item happens, it triggers certain responses, and it could lead into a root cause analysis corrective action plan. We've used root cause analysis for other things too. We did root cause analysis initially on trying to improve our brief processing time. The font's too tiny to read. I couldn't fit it all in, but this is the cause and effect, or fishbone, or Ishikawa diagram that we used to do the initial root cause analysis on timely filings for brief processing, and then from here the changes we then did about 6 to 9 months studying it, trying out different solutions, seeing what we're tracking those, and again, that we've done 2 more of those since then, and we'll keep doing more of those. So ways to identify and manage those. We also upgraded our knowledge management system in SharePoint, includes general collaborative and communication tools, but then also a full review of all of our procedures. There's now a cyclical process for making sure those stay current, and that provides an additional check on the work that folks are doing. The last category, alignment, evaluation, and improvement. We had SCORE, I mentioned previously, our initiatives at the end of it. We do after action as part of that too. Use this for lessons learned and for changes to implement going forward. We have RACI analysis, so responsible, accountable, consulted, informed designations for all of our principal activity groups. Everybody knows who's responsible for it. Within each procedure, we actually have usually 3 deep responsibility assignments, so we have clear identified backups as needed, which helps keep the focus on alignment of our operations together. We have a strategic plan. It came out at the end of 2019, just when we were starting to implement it. The pandemic happened, so we deferred for a year. But in 2021, we actually came out with this balanced scorecard that we use for tracking our items quarterly, reporting and sharing with staff. When we started this, we were at 0 for all of these. By the end of the first quarter, we hit this number of targets. By the end of the fourth quarter, we were already up to here, and right now we're on track to hit all of those metrics that we had planned for the strategic goals sometime this year. So we're starting work on a new strategic plan now, but this is another way, areas that weren't meeting, we identify it, we help plan around making sure that we're on track to get that back up to where we need it to be. So lessons learned in going through this whole process. First, you need to be able to clearly identify problems and then set immediate goals. I don't think if you're starting off from wherever you may be with G1 or any type of quality improvement, you can't say, oh, we want to just go all the way to the very end and be the very best of it. It's a slow process. You have to have a clear understanding of where the issues are, which takes a lot of time. It's not glamorous, and then problem solving to those goals. That leads into the next point, that when you're making change, no change just for the sake of change, there needs to be structure to that change, and you have to be disciplined with making that change. One nice thing, if you have those metrics and are regularly reviewing those, if a change isn't working, you should see that after a period of time, and you need to pivot and adjust accordingly. I've seen elsewhere where, well, we made a change, we're just going to stick with it, and kind of a sunk cost fallacy there. But you want to make sure that you're disciplined with that. That's the other part of when you're making change. You want to make sure that staff are included along the way. You probably saw in the earlier chart, transparency and accountability or in communication are 3 of our 4 core values here. We've tried to be as open and communicative and involving of staff along the way. We have a series of working groups, regular open forums and opportunities for staff to be able to provide their input on things, but then also getting them involved with the people who actually do the work, involved with the solutions as we're coming up with them. And then last, making sure that you're managing those risks. Risk management is something we were on the later side to incorporating into what we did. We would have really benefited by doing that from the very beginning and having a clear understanding of what those were and actively managing those. We eventually got there, but a lesson learned is we could have done that a little bit sooner. So I shared that we just got certified at the level 3. Now what? Well, one nice thing is G1 tells you kind of what you need to do next. I'm putting up here consolidated 4 and 5 of the requirements for those standards. And so now we're looking at what's written for number 4 and for 5. There's some overlap there. And seeing, all right, what are the next things we need to do to really take our organization and continue that maturing process and to try to get to that next level. And the G1 provides that roadmap and framework for us doing that. So based on that, we already have some ideas. So one, we're going to be implementing a customer relationship management system. We actually started doing that. This will allow us to have a better understanding of our customers' needs. Since our customers and suppliers are the same, it'll also help with the additional supplier management there and tracking and getting more measurements and data points to understand what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, and what we're doing in the middle, and kind of what we can do to keep things with a high level of quality. I already mentioned we're going to be creating a new strategic plan this year for the next 5 years. We're looking to have greater systems integration and of all of our processing and tracking, and that management of the supplier inputs and then our tracking of the outputs. We have it. It is not as robust and integrated as it could be, but trying to look for some type of a uniform method for everything being tracked through the same thing instead of different processes there, or different tracking systems. Continuing to expand our data capturing and reporting ability. We have, I did not count ahead of time, but we have, I think I want to say about 40 to 50 different data points we're tracking right now. And that's very helpful. Some of it we may not even realize at the time why or what we're going to do with it, but eventually we do think of, oh yeah, this was helpful here, do we have this or whatever. And so really helpful for us in making sure we're making factual-based decisions for what we're doing. Further expanding the use of critical incident reporting, corrective action, also preventative action, again, that focus on root cause, and then having a formalized change management program here. Again, we've done it, probably not as disciplined and structured as we could have, which would only help us. And that is it. I have, what, 11 minutes left or 12 minutes left for questions. And while you're thinking of questions, I'm going to have a sip of water.
Okay, so the first question there it is. How did COVID-19 impact your quality initiatives?
Well, yeah, so that's interesting. So if you look at the time frame for this, we actually did most of this during the pandemic, and which is, I think that's surprising that we were able to do that. We were only able to do that because we had a lot of systems in place. We were already familiar with teleworking on a more limited scale here, and then kind of after the initial, we paused everything in the initial couple months and saw that this was going to be with us for a bit. We were, like every other organization, in that treading water part of it. By about the fall of 2020, we had already gotten a handle on it. We actually started having staff coming back into the office on a part-time basis. and it allowed, I think, for some of those additional focuses there. I think also some of the distractions isn't the right word, but some of the things that we had put aside because it just didn't make any sense to work on freed up some time to work on this. We also had some additional staff adjustments in the office that let us dedicate additional resources to be able to work on this. And so, if anything, you know, we got things in order, stopped the crisis as soon as we could. Once that was done, really tried to get back to doing what we were doing and not just wait for this to end.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you. The second question is, how are your performance requirements established? Is there
how are our what requirements? How are
performance requirements
established?
Okay.
So, you know, it varies a little bit by all of them. We have some things that are set by internal policy. So, for example, the judges have a requirement that, you know, of how soon opinions have to issue once they're sent down to us, or how soon orders have to issue once they're sent down. So they're setting those. So, you know, we do that, and that drives aspects of the requirements. Others are based on input we've heard from practitioners. Some of that comes from, well, we were getting complaints when we were taking this amount of time. We reduced the amount of time, the complaints stopped. And so we know this is about the nice place for it. Some of it is based on, well, what is actually capable, what are we capable of doing with the staff that we have? So, you know, we could set a requirement that all motions must be processed in 1 hour. Well, that's not at all possible with the staff that we have, and no one's expecting it to be done. Well, maybe some people would like it to be done, but no one is reasonably expecting us to do it in that time. So it's kind of finding that balance. One good thing we have in our management team is we have a lot of years of experience working in the courts, and so some of this is based on, you know, what are generally standard practices and things like that. There isn't a clear aspect for some of these, so others are kind of what's reasonable, what do we think is reasonable, what do we think would be a satisfactory level, trying something out, all right, we're getting favorable feedback on this, let's keep it here, but then also assessing the capabilities of the organization. And that's for some of them, and again, the others are legally directed regulatory, the judges are directing it, so it's a little from here, a little from there. One thing I'm hoping once we get more feedback and input from our public stakeholders is we're going to get some of that data to get a better understanding of, you know, all right, were you satisfied with the timeliness of the handling of this matter? Now, some may always say no because it's never fast enough, but I'm hoping once we analyze all of that data over time, it'll give us a number that can help inform where we're setting things.
Thank you. What are the greatest roadblocks to doing something like this? Is there a political leadership? If there is political or leadership will, what are the other costs or needs to engage in a process like this?
Good question. So every organization is different. Every court is different. One of the things that I am very fortunate and blessed to be in a situation here where I've had significant and continued support from my senior leadership on these efforts. And I think as we've had slow incremental successes and kind of initial you know, wins on things, so to speak, it's shown, oh, okay, let's keep trying this and making that case slowly. That's been very beneficial for us to have here. Another thing that is another opportunity at other organizations is the staff here is fairly new. At this point, I've hired almost everybody on staff or put them in the current positions that they're in. That is odd and unusual. I just had to deal with, there were a series of retirements before I got here So a lot of the most experienced staff, they just weren't here. So it's a lot of newer folks who were very open to doing things. I didn't have to combat that aspect of culture, which just made it a lot easier. So yeah, I would say, you know, a combination of that leadership support, but also having a staff that wasn't as, you know, wedded to an existing structure, because there really wasn't one. The staff that were here when I got here were generally not happy with kind of how operations were going in the clerk's office, and so it was an easier way to say, oh, well, let's try this, let's try this. They also see the results. Having this data really helps support your case too, and then you know, that helps make the case for, oh, okay, well, this made sense, what about this, and so on.
The next question is, what is your staffing level and number of cases per year?
So we have the clerk's office. Now, there are several other offices in the court, plus all the judges. So we're just a corner of the universe here. The clerk's office has a staff of 19, which includes me. We have anywhere between 14 to 1,500 cases a year. So we're, for federal appellate courts, we're on the smaller side of it, both in terms of staffing as well as the number of cases that we have. I think it's been a motivator for us also because, you know, we don't get additional staff numbers. It's a rarity for that to happen, and we really need to, so kind of we're stuck with the staffing we have, the numbers rather, and we need to be as efficient and optimal as possible with that to be able to support the cases, which could increase or decrease. If the cases increase significantly, we don't necessarily get more staff to handle that. So we really have a frankly selfish incentive to keep things as efficient and optimal here. But these types of things, I'll just say for those who may be asking for larger courts or other situations, you can do these things with any size. It's about getting that resources dedicated to it. I mean, our quality management folks are, what is it, about 20%, 20-something, 25% of the office we're dedicating to this function, which helps the rest of the office work more effectively and efficiently. I'm currently unaware of a court in their local court that dedicates that level of resources to quality management.
Thank you. The next question is, did you use a consultancy to assist with developing the education program or any other part of this?
No, we did not. This was all done in-house.
Given this was an initiative within a part of the larger organization, what level of leadership was involved in making the decision to adopt and implement use of the G1 standards? And how was the ongoing decision-making managed to make needed changes? So
based on how we're structured here, since most of the aspects of what we had to do for actually almost all of the aspects for G1 were completely within my existing, you know, sphere of control, and didn't impact, like if I didn't need to change a policy that would have impacted something with the judges, which I can't do that. I can recommend, but I can't make any changes that impacts them. So the changes we were making were really all internal to the clerk's office, which meant there was a lot of leeway doing that. I certainly, you know, talked with my leadership on that and said, you know, we wanted to explore doing this and continuing things, and oh, here are the results we're getting, and I think that helped make the case. So I didn't have to worry about that really, because the decisions on how we process the case are delegated to our office to kind of figure out what to do within the broad legal and regulatory framework that the court has set up. Again, that is very much a blessing and privilege that I know we have here. Doesn't mean it's impossible, though, if you don't have that. I think this may be last question on something with the clock.
Well, there's more, but I think that was.
I can stay on and answer if people would like. I don't mind.
I will send you the rest of the questions.
Okay.
I will send the answers with the recording after this meeting.
Okay. And for those who were in very early and I was talking, not realizing we were on, we're this week going to be we're going to be releasing a case study talking through all of this and the work we've done, kind of a narrative version of what I talked about today. I was completely remiss on the, we had a lot of assistance from the Center for Quality Standards in Government, which is part of the Government Division, in working with us on being an initial pilot to try this out, and the significant advice and consultation that we got from them, separate from the training program, which is what the question was about. So just to clarify that portion of it. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this. You have my contact information here if you want to reach out for more information. Thank you for those comments that are coming in right now that are flashing up on my screen.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jarrett, and thank your team for stepping up to the pilot and showing the success of how you can apply the G1 standard to bettering your operations. I know that there's maybe a couple more questions in the chat, and we will make sure that you get answers to that. As you can see on the slide, this is some of the contact information that you can reach out to us individually and join the team, become part of ASQ and ASQ Government Division. We're looking to continue to do great work, and we really love your participation. But at that, we will end today's webinar. Again, thank you to Jarrett and his team. Thank you to the Government Division and the Center for Quality Standards. And we will be in contact soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a good day.